Hey, badass business owners. The other day I was asked a question in regards to expenses and personal expenses in particular, and how that plays into both your pricing and your profit and loss. And believe it or not, I actually get this question quite a bit. So I thought I would take an episode and let's discuss this. Now, for some of you, your immediate response is, your personal expenses have nothing to do with your pricing and your business's P&L. And for the most part, you are absolutely correct. But here's where that's coming from. And I think this helps kind of understand why the question comes up. Because when we are first starting our business, especially, or in the early years, and we haven't really have been able to get our hands around our pricing, a lot of times what we do is we think in our personal hat more so than our business hat. Because what we do is we go, wow, I need $4,000, $3,000 a month to survive. I need to make sure that my pricing covers that money that I need to survive personally. And that is true, you do, but one, your pricing cannot be dictated by what it is that it costs for you to live. But you do owe it to your pricing to make sure that you fully understand how your pricing will help you with that goal. Now, that might sound a little bit confusing, so let me kind of step back. As you know, I'm always talking about how sales minus cost of goods minus expenses equals profits. I'm also always talking about the fact that there are two ways that you get paid in your business. One is as an employee of your business, and two is as the business owner. Remember, there's you personally, and then there's the business. The business, while it is ran by you, it is owned by you, it is not you. It is its own entity and its own thing that has to be profitable. And if that business is profitable, then you, the business owner, is going to make some money. Now, there's two ways that people ask me about personal expenses. One is as a whole, like I was just talking about, and we'll come back to that. The second is when you use your personal stuff in the business. So, for example, you have one vehicle and you use that vehicle in the business. Does that count? And two, if you run your business from your home, does that count? Keep in mind, those are actually tax questions. And yes, partially it is true they are tied to your expenses, because you can write off as part of your expenses a portion of your home when it comes to your taxes, and you do get to claim that you have business use of your vehicle. Now, this is way more complicated than we're ever going to get to on this podcast, and I'm not even going to attempt it because I am not a tax professional, because there are a lot of rules and regulations that have to be met in order for you to claim them on your taxes, and that's where you want to talk to your tax professional about that. But what you do want to do when it comes to these things is ask yourself, are you paying something specific out of the business for it? So for example, let's just say you use your garage and you use your garage 100% for your business. Your business technically could rent the garage from you as part of doing business, and you can count that. But you, the homeowner, have to take that as a payment of rent on the house, but yet the business is renting it off and taking it that way. But since everything's a pass through to you anyways, it may or may not benefit you. So there's some weird things that you can do. I don't want you to get hung up on all of that. I want you to get your arms around your numbers first, and then have a sit-down conversation with your tax professional as to what you can do to possibly take any of those deductions if that's truly what you want to do. But honestly, that's not the problem most of you guys have. Most of you have a sales and profit problem, not whether you can take advantage of your car or your vehicle or anything else that you use as part of home. That's more for sophisticated people when it comes to understanding their business numbers. And I'm not saying you're not sophisticated, but if you're not at that point where you really understand your business numbers, that's at a deeper level that you're not even at this stage yet. I want you to focus on how do you make sure that you're priced correctly to be able to have a successful and profitable business. Because like I said, first off, there is nowhere in that formula, sales minus cost of goods minus expenses equals profits, that talk about personal expenses, but I can see because you have expenses in general. Now, when I look at this question, I kind of see it a couple different ways. One is, how do you make enough money at the end of the day to be able to pay your bills? That's bottom line what this question really means for most people. It's like, hey, if I got to make this $3,000 a month, how do I make sure that I do that? Well, it starts with, one, you've got to be priced correctly in the first place, which means you have to have a true understanding of what your cost of goods are. Now, remember, your cost of goods are going to be the products, materials, ingredients that you use in the business to provide the product or service that you have. Your other part of cost of goods is your employee wages to provide that product or service. So once again, if you have to make your product, then yes, you would have wages, a fair wage labor for the number of hours it takes to be able to make that product. If you have a service and you provide that service, you have to actually go there and do it, then you will have labor hours for that service that also have to be included in your cost of goods. Now, if you just start answering the phones, you're doing scheduling, those are operational. Those labor hours are actually expenses. So it has to be directly related to the creating or providing of the product or service. Now, sometimes people will ask about cashiers. Technically, cashiers are not making the product, nor are they providing the service. They are providing a service, but not the service they are buying. They are buying, for example, you to do their lawn, to clean their pool. That's the service they're paying, not for the cashier who's checking them out. That's an operational task. Sometimes people will ask about that. So no, anyone who's ringing up anything, that's operational. Everything else is going to go under your expenses because those are operational expenses to run the business from day to day. And if you use it to run the business, for example, the most common things are going to be marketing, any kind of advertising that you might do. It's going to be your vehicle, if you got to get gas, if it's going to be insurance that you have to have, it's going to be uniforms that you need to have. There's any extra, the payroll costs for the people, if you have an actual payroll. A lot of times when I say that you're going to pay yourself, it doesn't mean you're actually going to go out and get a payroll service set up. It just means you're going to write yourself a check saying, hey, I'm pulling this money out of the business for the time I'm working in the business. You don't have to go out and get the actual payroll to do that. But operational expenses are anything that's used to actually run the business. And I think that's where that confusion comes in, that can I count my house? Can I count this? Because I'm having to pay those to have my business. If you have a van that you use, a mobile groomer, for example, and you have a payment that has to do with that vehicle, then you get to count that. I mean, if you have a truck payment, but your truck is only used for business, that's different. Remember, a lot of people will use their personal vehicle for part business, not part for business. And on the taxes, you have to say how much of your vehicle use was for business use and how much wasn't. So it gets a little bit more tricky. But for most people, if they buy like a little box van or they have one of those trailers they pull behind, it's 100% used for the business because that's what it's used for. In that case, that is counted as part of those expenses. Now, in order for you to make your $3,000 a month, you've got to make sure that you, the employee, have enough work to be able to collect a paycheck, right? So if you're working 40 hours a week at $20, then you know that as an employee side of you, then you're going to get $800 a week. And if there's 4 weeks in the month, you're looking at $3,200. So just your basic employee wages are going to be able to pay your $3,000. But if the business is profitable, and let's just say the business itself has an extra $1,000 at the end of the month, well, you're going to take that extra $1,000 and you're going to put a third of it away probably for taxes. You might put a third back into the business, reinvest it, and you might take a third of it as a business owner. You want to make sure that you set aside first and foremost the money for the taxes. That always comes first because you do not want to be caught with your pants down that you do not have enough money for your taxes. And then it comes down to how much you're going to reinvest back in the business and how much you're going to take as the owner. But by making sure that you are including your wages as an employee in the business, then you're going to make sure that you have enough money to be able to pay your expenses. But please, whatever you do, do not work it backwards and say, hey, I automatically have to pull out $3,000 in order to survive, because you need to make sure that you're priced correctly and that you have enough sales. Yes, you can sit there and say, no matter what, I've got to make this work so I can pull $3,000. Can you do that? Absolutely. Do a lot of people do it? Absolutely. But could that also cause a problem in your pricing? Absolutely. It could actually cause you to do one of two things. It could cause you to overprice your product because you're thinking of you first and not necessarily what's the right price for the products. Or B, it could cause you to underprice because you're focused more on you getting your money and not necessarily the business being profitable. So you want to make sure that if you are going to do that, that you are savvy enough to say, hey, when I do my pricing, I'm not going to just hold it to this amount, because depending upon how much you charge for your services, that could play into it. Because, for example, if you charge $50 every time you do a specific service, then you need to know that my cost of goods are going to be a certain amount. So if you're paying yourself $20 an hour as an employee in the business and you have, say, $5 in costs every single time that you do that, then you've got $25 in cost of goods that have to be included in that pricing. And then you have to add up all of those expenses to see what percentage that takes. So if you have a $50 service, your cost of goods might be $25 and you need to set aside $15 out of every sale for the expenses to be paid. And that means that there's going to be a profit left over of $10. This might get a little confusing, and which is one reason why I really recommend to people that you listen to some of our past episodes where we dive into it from different angles, because sometimes numbers are really tricky for people, and it's about seeing it and hearing it a certain direction that gives you that aha moment. One of the reasons why we have the Badass Business Owner YouTube channel, so people can visually see this as well. Part of the confusion why so many people love and hate numbers is, one, you can make numbers look any way that you want to do it. There's a bunch of ways to skin a cat to get to the same number. And it really confuses a lot of people because depending upon who's doing the training, they might go, well, see, that's the problem with math. Every time someone teaches it to me, they teach it to me differently. They're just different angles, different ways of getting there. It's like if you were to go to your local grocery store, I'll bet you can think of 5 to 6 ways in which you can get to the grocery store. Doesn't make any of them right or wrong. It's just one is probably the more direct way and everything else just kind of goes a little bit further out of their way. Think of math as the same thing. Math a lot of times is just a bunch of different ways to get to the same number. But one of them is going to make more sense to you than others. It's like when you give directions, some people you can tell them street, street, street. And some people they're like, hang a left at the 7-Eleven and then go down to Tommy's Tune-Ups, make a right. Everybody's different. And that's why we want to look at numbers a couple different ways. But my biggest thing that I want to get across in today's episode is, yes, personal expenses, you are using them in a way to do your pricing, but you're doing it more from what do I need to make as an employee in my business? And then how do I create enough profit to cover any gaps that I have? And just that if you want to take it to the whole nother level of how do I write it off, quote unquote, that's where you need to get with your tax professional, because they're going to let you know if you even qualify for that. Because in some cases, many people don't even qualify for it because of the 100% use that has to go into a lot of times into certain parts of it. And, like for example, in your house, your office has to be 100% used for that business and nothing else. And very few people can actually pass that part of the test. And then it's about the certain percentage of the square footage of the house and blah, 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 blah. Use the tax professional. They can let you know if you're going to be good at that or not. All right. So yes, make sure that you're paying yourself a fair wage as an employee. Make sure that you are creating a profit with your pricing. And those should be enough to create what it is that you need to be able to pay your personal expenses. But no, your personal expenses are never part of the equation, are never part of how you are going to make sure you're priced. You're going to make sure you're priced correctly because you're going to say, hey, this is the fair wage for a labor hour for what this particular product or service is. And this is what my percentage of my expenses tend to run at the end of the month. And if my expenses run 15% of my sales, then I know I need to take 15% and have it as part of my pricing that's going to be taken away to go pay my expenses. So a lot of different ways, angles of trying to share with you how this works. But my main goal is that one of the ways will stick and it'll make more sense and give you that aha moment. So sorry if I've been confusing it all. I've been trying not to. It's just there's so many different ways of getting there. But the important thing is that no, your personal expenses at no point are part of the equation. But yes, they kind of are as that employee piece. And that's why it gets confusing to a lot of people. And like I said, I've sat down with people that will actually say, well, I need to make this amount of money, so I need to price it this way. It doesn't work that way, because that's what's going to get you in trouble. And that's why people never seem to grow their prices the right way in the first place, and why they never really learn their business numbers, because they're so focused on just making the amount of money that they need to be able to pay their personal stuff. So you've got to separate that out. That's, for example, when you hire an employee, you don't price based off of your employee being able to pay their bills. And really, that's who you are in that moment, is you are that employee. You're not going to price to make sure that employee can pay their bills. That employee needs to create enough work to keep themselves busy so that they will have the wages and they will create the owner's wage. But you never make it a condition of the pricing. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, because now I think I'm just saying the same thing a lot of different ways, and I'm going to make it even more confusing. And we do not want to do that. Thanks for listening to the show. And don't forget, if you want to learn more about your business numbers, there'll be this little jingle thingy at the end. Check out the Know Your Business Numbers course, where we walk through all this. You get lifetime access, by the way. And I do plan to update this course, and anybody that's in the course at its cheap price that it is now will get the new course. And even if I raise the price, you just always have access for the one-time price that you're paying today. So, I'm not even going to put that little jingle on the end, because I just did the commercial right there. All right, with that, I'm out of here, and I will talk to you guys on the next episode. Bye for now.